to all of you. Let me go to my details. Actually, when I have seen the lot of panel members and then the earlier speakers who touched upon this AI, it's a really wonderful subject. But what happens in actually the industrial scenario as well as the current academic scenario? The one way that we are looking the core automation, that where the computers were actually involved in the initial days, and then now we want to use the same computer systems in the decision making process. That means from the one side that we are having this automation of automation of the business processes, and second is the decision making process within the business processes. So that is the two extremes that is there, and then currently almost all kind of a technologies are playing role. It's like may not be like a AI, it could be like most of the other interdisciplinary fields also playing a major role. And look at this. This I like always this kind of a cartoon which was I taken from the kdnuggets.com. Those who are familiar with the data mining research, they will look at this KD Nuggets for the latest updates. As one of these slide gives that where we are there in the technology, and it says this smile, our AI will take a picture of your face and will know exactly what you would like for a dinner tonight. Suppose if a couple goes to a dinner and they want to go to order, but the waiter says you don't require to say anything, just you have to be a smile, and he will take a picture, and the device which is having as an intelligent enough to identify the taste and then the interest of the couple, and then take they also know what kind of how much that their levels of hungriness, and then how much they can able to eat, and then and what they are already taken in the morning time. So a lot of it will take consider, and finally it will prepare the menu. So that is a kind of AI that now today we are looking at it. Even if we use the Google Maps or even using the Google Assistant, like even Apple Siri or virtual assistants. So all the things are making our life, everyday life, we want to behind some kind of AI systems. And you can see whether we like it or don't like it, then we have to go along with these AI systems. Suppose in the case of the right hand side, the dinner, you can see dinner table. So even sometimes, even if we don't like the AI, still we may get something else which we are not able to in the position to eat also. So that's why the technology is actually driving us our lives more in deeper. That's why the AI is being used to make decisions about your life, whether you like it or not. So there's a good quotation was given in this KD Nuggets. So that's why we have to believe with this technology. And the topic is given me is like a deep learning. And many of the learning paradigms are there. The earlier speakers were touched upon that there is supervised, unsupervised learning. And there's recently they picked up like the last 4 or 5 years. There people are talking about the reinforcement learning, where they want to get the knowledge from the environment. So they want to give a kind of a reward or a punishment to the each and every activity, so that the decisions taken around the decision taken in the environment can also be taken as an input in the process itself, so that it can reinforce itself, the engine, and adapt to the current situation. And the another kind of a learning mechanisms people are talking about is self-organization. That's what today you can see the driverless cars or even the metros which are driving. So many of the aspects, the drones and everything. So many of the aspects they are going for a self-organized system. That means the system configures itself based on the input reactions received from the environment. That is like a self-organization. So now you look at this, the way that technology is evolving, people are talking about more and more depth into deep learning. And whether knowing or unknowingly, the deep learning became famous, it became a popular. Even today at NIT Warangal, if you look at the projects which people are doing it, 95% of the projects are of the deep learning. When I ask that exactly why you choosing as a deep learning, there is no answer. It's like unless there is a deep learning algorithm was not there in the work, it is very difficult to access the papers. So that is the way that the deep learning was ruling at this point of time. What happens in the deep learning actually is simplified the overall the learning process. The learning patterns which are coming earlier with a lot of hurdles, which we'll see in the next slide. But this deep learning will make us a very simplified way of working it. So unless if you have a simple computational systems, and there are many people who provided us a good libraries like a Scikit, TensorFlow, they're already providing us this toolkits, so one can easily go ahead and then use these kind of a deep learning tools. And then this deep learning is a broad area of the machine learning overall, and depends on the started with the artificial neural networks. The main important the difference between the other learning mechanisms and this is like a representation learning. That means there's like a lot of feature engineering is automatically happening in the deep learning. So that's why they call it a representation learning. So each and today you look at it, either it could be say a word, a speech, or image, everything can be represented as embeddings. So that's what you can represent everything in the form of a embedding, and then the learning itself is completely changed to a representational learning. Of course, the learning could be either supervised or it could be unsupervised or it could be semi-supervised depending on the data set that we are having in hand. So if you look at this deep learning, and what it does is it try to find the good representations. So the way that we look at in the earlier days, that we had to find out which are the like significant attributes in the given data set. But now the deep learning itself is try to find these good representations from the data, and then we don't require any kind of a handcrafted feature engineering. That means one need not to choose which attributes I need to select, or which are significant enough, or which are correlated, so that I can use for my algorithm. So that is a basic drastic difference coming out of the deep learning. Look at this to understand better of the where the deep learning is coming. In the traditional machine learning algorithms or traditional machine learning solutions, you given any input, first of all we need to do the feature extraction. The identifying features will be actually the critical part in doing this one. Though the classification models, the available classification techniques can be used it, but however, for using each and every classification technique, there is a kind of a pre-processing, and lot of features need to be identified. Once you identify the features, then only you can able to give to the classifier model. So the most of the efforts of the machine learning scientists or machine learning the skill set people, they will focus, they will spend their most of the time on the feature extraction. If it's like a relational data, we can say all the attributes can be features, and then do the subset selection and all other kind of a feature engineering process. If it is like a image, they can take the image could be like a texture features, the color features, or anything. If it's like a speech, it could be like a spectrograms or any such kind of a features. So that means one has to identify, spend most of the time in identifying the features, and then those features can be given to the classifier. In case the features are not identified properly, some of the features which are not useful, they are given to classify. The entire classification decision making process itself will go into a waste. So that's why the people are spending a lot of time on the feature extraction. But coming to learning, you can see the same kind of input. You can give the same input, but you're also getting the same kind of a classifier output. But thing is, you don't require to have a explicit feature extraction. That means the feature extraction process itself is become like implicit as part of the deep. Are Yeah, hope that I am back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this deep learning actually focuses on the feature extraction implicitly, and then identify which are itself is significant enough or not. So and then we may be having some kind of a doubt of how it can be a big process. Earlier days, the data sets are very small and can be easily, people can easily identify. Now the data set size is also large, and it is very difficult for a human beings to identify which are the features are important. And look at the complexity involved in the data also. It is very difficult to clearly writing a separate boundary between the classes. So if the classes become like a more and more non-linear, suppose the data set is like a more non-linear, and trying to find a boundary across these kind of a non-linear shapes is very difficult. And because any classification algorithm or any kind of intelligent algorithm try to identify the kind of a groups, right, as much close to as possible to the reality. So that means the kind of a features which I need to choose may not be in our it may not be sufficient enough sometimes. So as the data is becoming large and large, the identifying the features and the complexity involved, the modeling the complexity involved within the features is a gigantic task. So that's why now deep learning algorithms are helping us in getting those aspects. Now look at this, the basics of any deep learning models or neural networks. I'm not going into details of this neural in detail, but for the sake of understanding of the deep learn nets, so we may be required. So there's like again input will be there and output will be there, and you can see there are the hidden states. There are a lot of hidden states are involved. Correct? The input layer, output layer, and hidden states. And not to more worry about this kind of a neural network, but it could be like a simple mathematical representation. That means it's like y is a function of, that is that f is correct, is a function of some kind of a relations. And the relations could be with respect to some like a weights, because you can see the edges are also in the weights, right? So those are like a simple mathematical equations. Usually the activation function, people are talking about the sigmoid function, but one can use any other functions where mostly in the deep learning people are using the ReLU and everything, tan h kind of aspects. Look at this is another representation of the same kind of a neural network. Now you look at it, suppose for any application, you have to take the data, suppose assume that there is structural data, you can give it, and this network will try to learn it based on the hidden layers, and then it will try to give the classes. But here is like a 5-class classifier, right? But if you are having here, most of the neural networks, the traditional neural networks are having the single layer. If the people are now looking at people are now looking at the multiple layers as part of the network. So that's why people are calling it as a deep neural networks. So having more number of hidden layers, that's why it transformed the simple neural network into a deep neural network. Now you can see the complexity involved in these edges. You can see there's so many edges, right? So these edges trying to model the internal details of the each and every input. So where we are having this, what is happens here in the deep NN, though you are getting the input, you will get the output, the classifier model, but the interpretation is very difficult. Even the single neural networks also, it is very difficult to identify. This is a black box for a user. But if you go to the deep neural network, even here also it's like a completely black box, and we do not know what could be the part of how we got the particular item is classified. Thing is, another thing is the sequence of the events. That is a main important thing which is lagging in the deep neural networks. Suppose you do for one particular event is okay, but a sequence of events comes, it is very difficult to use this one. That's why the architectures of deep neural networks are continuously changing, and they are talking about the first one is like a recurrent neural networks, where the RNNs will stay like here. The A could be like one neural network for a given input, and you are getting the output, but there is a kind of a loop is also attached. That means the recurring neural networks can be thought of as a deep neural networks, which is comprising of a loops, right? So that's why RNNs and neural networks work together, and by working together means the previous state of the neural network will be taken into account when you are currently the current one for doing the prediction. That means if you are having a x1, x2, x3, xn kind of a input, okay? So one after another, the input is giving to the neural network. It will try to learn at each and every loop and try to give the output. That means we are trying to incorporate the temporal aspect into the neural networks. So that means if you expand this RNN diagram, it looks like you have x0 to xt as the input, and you have each and every neural network, the deep NN network, and you have the states like h0, h1, h2, hn. And you can see there is also an array between the one deep neural network to the another deep neural network. That means every time the data was taken, the knowledge is continuously taken into account for the next steps it will go. And if you look at some of the statistics and probability people, they can also look at earlier in the regression algorithms. We also do the ARIMA kind of a models where the current state depends on the previous states, right? So that's why they are slowly incorporating these kind of a models into the part of the neural networks. And you can see how this is relevant and why it is a more important kind of things. In the traditional RNN, the neural networks, it is like a more depends on the short-term dependencies. That means if you look at a simple text, you can take the clouds are in the sky. Of course, this is a toy example, but you can take the clouds are in the sky, and then that means the sky is related to the what? And here the missing information is the sky is related to the like a clouds, correct? So that kind of a, that's why they are called short-term dependencies. But what we need is like we need a long-term dependencies where it can also look at the my past knowledge, and then maybe it could be like a 2-3 instances before what was I learned it from the networks. That's why the people are now that NLP based applications, where you can look at it here. This is the in LSTM, the
Seems again we lost him. Yeah, he's back. Welcome back, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for this because of we are going for the online classes nowadays, but we have to face these kind of things. My net is also very good connection. I don't know why I'm dropping off in between. So maybe looking at our patients.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. Sometimes it happens.
Yeah. So yeah, here this is the LSTM is actually trying to add 3 more gates to the regular RNN. So if you look at in the earlier RNN, we have a function called TANH. That's an activation function, that tan hyperbolic function. But along with the tan hyperbolic function, there is also 3 gates are added. So that's the first gate is called input gate, which is actually useful to compute the state of the current input, correct? What you want to allow. That means you already captured knowledge over a period of time. Out of that, how much you want to allow for the next states. And here there's the next gate is like a forget gate is more important. How much the previous state you want to let through. That is also you want to control it, right? Because as a human brain, we always there's a chance of forgetting also. And nowadays, currently, people are working on the forgetting curves. They want to incorporate as part of these neural networks. So this is a forget gate will be useful for that purpose. And of course, so how much of the internal state that we want to expose to the external network. So these are the kind of additions were made from the RNN to the LSTM. So now people, of course, LSTM is like having a more number of gates, but with a less simplified version is like a GRU, right? So these GRUs also have the gates of the like updated gate and then relevance gate. So instead of comparing like 3 gates of in LSTM, GRUs are having the 2 gates. And if the systems are not much more complex, people can use a GRU. That's why nowadays the lot of the works are happening in the data augmentation stage. The GRs are using actually when they're going for a data, the kind of a complex processing, people are using the LSTM. So this LSTM and GRU both together making like a gating mechanisms, because the problem which the current RNN is the vanishing gradient problem. Because what happens as we know that there is overfitting and everything, right? Whenever we develop a classifiers. But what will happen as you are having a more and more complex information you are passing to the network, and there is a possibility that the network also may confuse, because it's like almost like in humans which you are making. If you give more and more information in a short span of time, sometimes we also may get confused. The similar way, there's a lot of confusion also maybe happens in this neural network. So it's better to have a controlling the aspects rather than giving the everything to the output, the processing it. Better to have kind of a controls. So to avoid that, people are using this vanishing to avoid this vanishing gradient problem, which is mostly causes in the RNN. So they are using LSTM and GRUs. So then the people, as a next one more step, they have gone ahead, began using this LSTM and GRUs more proper. There's called a encoder and decoder networks. So this is like an advanced stage of people are using, because now you can see they're using, people are trying at making too many layers. So earlier we are having like very few layers people have started, and then now based on the complexity they are going on increasing the layers. So now they are trying to separate the encoder and decoder separately, because of they want to make these sequence models more effective. So that's why they call it sequence to sequence models. So this by each and every sequence model could be an LSTM or could be any GRU, can be talked about. And then another widely become used is the CNNs, the convolution neural networks. But this is also become popular due to the image processing applications mostly. And you look at the high level architecture having an image, given an input, an image as an input, and you can predict the again a class. Here there is like a 4 classes, correct? There is input and there is output. There in between there are several layers placed. Now here, for understanding for this future engineering, this example could be very good to know. Initially, earlier the machine learning algorithms wants to say you want to identify the features of this image, and those features you need to give to the model. But here we are only defining what is the kind of a convolutions and what is the pooling layer, and also sometimes we can have a fully connected or softmax layer at the end to get the classification. So that means we are not extracting explicitly what is the feature, but the models itself, the model or kernels, automatically taking care of that extracting the features. Maybe you can see the small rectangles, dash rectangles, where that could be like a segment. Usually we can say the segment running over an image. So that portion of these features are collectively taken by using some kind of convolution operator, and then again some of them are taken into the pooling operators, and then going forward kind of things. So here, this convolution and pooling, they are two important layers in the overall CNN things. The convolution operator, it takes an input image and also take a kernel. Kernel could be the user-defined kernel, and then this input, based on the kernel information, the nodes, the pixels. So that figure you can see how it is goes on. So the 3x3 matrix, right? The 3x3 is the window. You operate like a window operator. So the next 3x3. So that means we have each and every feature map here. Okay? So that means it looks like a visual. We are learning like a visual pattern. And this is a good example for looking at how the convolution operator happens. Suppose if you take this 3x3 kernel filter like 1010101001, so you apply this kernel one on this input matrix, correct? So you can look at it here again. So this is like a shifting window size 3x3, correct? And for each and every window it is calculating, we are getting the convoluted feature in a very simplified manner, correct? So then next is like a pooling operation. Usually we'll have a pooling, the max pooling and minimum min pool kind of things, depending on the application people are using it. This is to try to avoid a lot of overfitting, because what happens when you choose a kind of these values, if you take what max pool will do, max pool will choose the again a matrix. Out of that, we should take the maximum element. So if you're using the 2x2 filter, that is the 4 elements, it will try to find the maximum element of the 4 and keep into like a one kind of a element. That means one way it is trying to reducing the size of the input, the feature map, what are the feature map is size reducing. And another thing is, even if suppose if there's some kind of a noise was there, or any time of a kind of a changes are happening, it will be smooth and also. So it can be it can be handled using this pooling layer. So here we have to look at the kind of a transformations that are happening or the kind of a distortions that are exist in this one. So we have to find out, right? That's why they say a small distortion in input will not change the output of a pooling. That's why we are taking this neighborhood principle. So because a particular pixel or particular value, the feature map is not going individually, it is going along with its neighbors. That is, it's taking it's the essence of the neighbors also as part of itself. So this is actually a CNN for classification, and because people are started this CNN with the images, now people are trying to use this CNN for the text classification. And if you look at the text classification, they have can take the sentence matrix, right? Suppose this is like we have the embeddings converted into each sentence can be converted to embeddings, and then you can have a convolutional map. You can use any kernel function to make it, and then use the pool representation. And finally, people are using for the text classification softmax function. So actually, softmax given function will give the like exponential kind of a variable, exponential kind of a derivation, where it tries to give some of the probabilities associated with respect to the output class. So the people are today using almost all text classification aspects. They are using the softmax function. And of course, here in the CNN, one more thing which you forgot is like a ReLU operator. So there's a ReLU, because if you want to have any nonlinearity, so that to handle that nonlinearity in the data, people are using the ReLU layer. So ReLU is again another function which can be used in this CNN. So I will try to conclude this with respect to one of the case study which was part of the industry. So this is a social signal processing and emotion discovery. So usually the emotion discovery is trying to help understand the users based on their happiness, sadness, anger, disgust, fear, surprise kind of things. And sometimes they're like the body language which they want to express expressing their conversations, right? So this out of the emotion discovery, one is the one you can look at it, the conversational AI, which is coming a big way in nowadays, the conversational artificial intelligence agents. So the problem is with respect to the banking context, where the banks are having the call centers, and each person will take so many calls per day, right? Almost like they are serving like 1 billion calls across the globe, because this is like an international bank. And the point is the managers periodically look at the data and see, they want to identify whether any customers are dissatisfied or not. Now you can see there's a large gap between when the call was recorded and then the actually processing by the person, the manager who is looking at it. So during the call, suppose if any dissatisfied customers are there, the bank wants to serve them better, right? But because of the large number of these calls, you can see just given this some of the statistics which are collected at that point of time, the data ranging from 1 petabyte to the from one region to the few zettabytes per month. That is the kind of a data which are making. So out of that, those many conversations, the manager when he picks up few calls, he actually dissatisfied customers, right? So that's why, is it possible? The challenge is here is, can you identify a dissatisfied customer's conversations from a given database of the conversations? That is a problem statement which was given. Now, from the conversations, the emotions point of view, there is a lot of different variations of the emotions. Could be like a happiness, a sadness kind of a thing. And based on this some kind of a sentiment which they are having, the emotion involved, the sentiments like a positive or negative or neutral, right? So each dialogue can be classified either is having the emotions of each and every user. So this emotion analysis, emotions discovery, which is useful to understand the level of customer satisfaction. We have developed a multi-modality framework. The meaning is, we want to incorporate all these three kind of signals. One is like a speech, text, and then image. So all these three things we want to incorporate it. So the given input signal, that the conversation, okay. So we are employed the two levels of synthesis. The first level is the emotion analysis. Emotion analysis from both the text data and as well as the speech data. But of course, we converted the same speech into the text, and then next is the facial emotion data, which is like image data, and we are taking these three different levels of the signals. On these three different signals. So first is the audio signal. From audio signal, we are using some emotion analysis. It could be neutrality, happiness, sadness, or anger and fear. Or it could be like a text signal. We are using the sentiment analysis, like a positive or negative or neutral. And then from image signal also, we are taking the various levels of the emotion analysis. Our idea is, can we develop a kind of a deep learning framework? Right? That's why we call it developing a conversational AI. The fusion of the three modes of the data. That's why we call it multimodality. Namely, the speech, text, and then video for emotion detection from a conversation. So we are taking the text input, and for text input, we want to make the segment extraction, because text is like a continuous, right? Because if you look at giving a sentence, every sentence, if you are giving it as input, so that will be okay. You can use directly deep and this convolution network, anything you can use it. But here conversations are like a continuous, so we need to segment the text also. So we use the segment extraction. Then each segment, that means now it could be like a paragraph or could be a sentence. We are giving to a sentiment classification, where you can see we have used multiple levels of LSTMs. Multiple layers we have used the LSTMs, and we use the multi-layer perceptron. Then we use the softmax algorithm to use the polarity of each sentence. So that is one signal is coming from the text, and then we are taking the speech, audio, and then video. So then we have used the feature extraction, and then this feature extraction will be taken up with the CNN classifier, right? And here our feature extraction is not at the level of the CNN aspects of it, but we want to convert this speech into the embeddings. So those embeddings we are giving to the classifier, and then these are given to the emotion signal. That emotion signal is given a feedback to the the fusion purpose, where we have a dependencies between these three modes.
Dr. Alex, sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, how long will it take, sir?
Maybe 1.5 minutes, not more than.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, emotion analysis, and then there's a CNN classifier will be given, and then finally we do the prediction. So this is where we want to we are taking the traditional CNN, but we want to modify the embedding layer. This is where our part will come into picture, because we are not saying that CNN to use only as a tool, but we want to see what as a computer science people what we can add to that. So in that way, we are added this embedding layer, the conversion to and everything, and adding the attention models. Because the sequence decoder models, now they're transferring, adding these attention models by calling them. There's another term called transformer. The people currently people are using it, the transformers, right? So that means they want to use this encoder decoder tools as an attention mechanisms. So that's what the overall signals will be taken and then classified. So this is that's why we call this like a deep reinforcement learning. So that's what our idea of incorporating it. So one can have an emotion analysis from the neutrality. It's based on some scores one can able to decide. So and we compare trading it. But the idea here is, because we want to identify the dissatisfied customers, it is not only possible to do any one signal. Suppose you can see there's a negative samples are 6, and which are having happy emotion. That means they're talking very nicely, but they're using very harsh words. So that kind of a deep level of analysis is needed if we really want to identify the dissatisfied customers. So it's not that only somebody else speaks very loudly and in a shouting manner, but he may be using very polite words. That means the sentiment could be positive, right? So those are the internal details that we need to analyze to identify the dissatisfied customers. Sometimes, of course, in the face also one can able to identify the different kinds of the emotions. So that's all from my side. If I can take questions if anything is there.
Guys, any questions? Quickly put it in the chat.
Of course.